Thank you so much for listening to the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If you're looking to conduct a modern job search, you've come to the right show. Bring a voice to the unemployed, underemployed, and underappreciated members of the workforce. I'm always trying to hack and reimagine the new job search and provide techniques and tools through relatable voices for the modern job seeker, like the one we have today, Jessica Dillard, founder of Dillard and Associates, award-winning career staffing professional resume writing service with close to 20 years experience in the career services industry. This is the second time she's been on the show. Today we're discussing resume trends in 2018, and we're going to try to wrestle with some of the more branding trends as it relates to resumes, as well as some of the we won't call them controversial aspects of it, but we will kind of tackle some of the philosophies here, because if you ask 365 resume writers what would be the right one, I'm sure you'll get maybe 360 different answers. So how are you, Jessica?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Mark. I hope you guys are keeping warm.
Yeah, I woke up this morning, it was 7.
Oh,
So, and you're in California, so I'm
I'm
sure.
enjoying 78-degree weather right
Yeah,
now.
I was gonna say you can. Yours is a double 7, so that's all right. Getting ready to go to South Carolina, where it's a whole 30 degrees warmer in the evening. At least it'll be near the 50s and 60s in the afternoon. But nevertheless, looking forward to this wonderful trip. Anyway, we are talking about resume trends for 2018. One of the tricks of having to talk about resume always is just how many different answers and different perspectives we have in writing resumes. Is quite confusing. Having owned a resume company for some time, uh, well, I used to own a resume company. That was always the challenge. But there's just some things that are just kind of, you just don't do. But we're going to try to focus more on strategic and try to give you with some really practical takeaways today. So one of the things I do want to kind of inquire of your perspective is these days, would you say more now than ever that resumes are more like a PR marketing branding document offering the employer the preview of the professional's best attributes? And I know most people don't think of it that way, but it's more of get it in front of someone, make it attractive, capture their attention enough for them to be interested.
absolutely. But that has been one of the founding issues with resumes for over 500 years. The idea is to get a piece of document in the hands of a decision maker or before a particular individual to have an invitation extended. Our goal here is not only to present you with the information on our candidates, but
Hmm.
also to give you a little bit of their background with the hopes that it's enough for you to get inquisitive and then invite them for the interview. But this has been a practice that's been around, whether it's been on a digital CV or infographic, or if it's personal URL, if it's on social media, if it's on a business card. The entire goal is to invite the engagement.
Absolutely. Um, and you go back 400 or 500 years. Of course, we're not suggesting that they all look the same,
No,
uh,
of course not. We're
but
constantly evolving.
yeah, constantly. But I think we've discussed it on the show, and other guests have discussed on the show that perhaps the document is more brief than it ever has been. Not suggesting that everybody's got to get down to one page. There's some argument still whether should it be one page, should it be 2 pages. Is it all right for 4 or 5 pages? When really, I think there's no one right answer, but you don't have to limit yourself or expand it beyond what will be attractive to an employer.
Exactly. Uh, what I typically ask a candidate is, what is it that we're trying to convey? What is the message? What is it that we need to present? What are your skills, your attributes, things that would interest a hiring manager in your field? So, given the applicant tracking system, we're no longer limited to how many pages a document can be. You can actually put, if you wanted, if you really felt the need to put a 15-page CV out there, and the applicant tracking system would scan it, parse it, and send it on to the recruiter as normal. But on the end of that, there's an individual like myself who then retrieves that information. And do you really think when I have one position and maybe 100 different applicants applying that I want to sit and actually read through 15 pages of document? That if only if it's interesting, if it's relevant, if it's necessary for that particular field. If it's a marketer, may not be. If it's an admin assistant, certainly not. But
Right.
it has to be relevant. It has to be something that is mandatory for that particular field.
Now it's going to differ. It's going to be different per sector, being that
Yes,
federal resumes are usually a lot longer uh, than a civilian. So if you're applying to the U.S. government for a job, it's likely they
absolutely.
want to scrutinize what you had 20 years ago, as opposed to somebody applying to a bank. Unless you're an executive, probably not as relevant.
Absolutely. And that's the decision each candidate, depending on what career path they're taking, we have to sit down and make that decision. I do get applicants who want to tell me everything they've done since high school. And although you may think it's impressive, it may not be relevant for this particular position. So we help you actually determine the relevancy of information, what we should include. And that's going to dictate how long your resume is going to be. Oftentimes, we can remain within 1 to 2 pages because most employers are really concerned with what you've accomplished in the last decade.
Hmm.
So it helps us tailor the resume, become a little more concise with information. And then if we need to do more, if we need to travel further back, we can always do that as well. But let's really stick with the most relevant information.
It's about holding attention.
Absolutely.
It's about holding attention. So, you know, unlikely that somebody's going to have 15 pages of
Well,
really riveting, riveting and dramatic content. Uh, but I'm afraid that our attention spans have been shortened because we are looking at, in many cases, people are looking at a mobile phone.
that's
Nobody's not going to sift through 15 pages on a mobile phone unless they know they're reading a book. Uh, but even then, uh, you know, that 15 pages, as far as a resume, can turn into like maybe 40 or 50 pages on a mobile phone, depending upon the app that they're using.
Well, and that's something to consider as well, is if the information that you're sending, the end recipient, what device are they using to view this? Are they looking at it via a tablet or a laptop, a PC, a Mac computer? Is it my mobile device? There are so many different tools now that we can actually use to access information. Thankfully, in many of the larger corporations, they have recruiters on hand. They have HR generalists, and many of them are sitting at a PC. They're
Hmm.
using a computer instead of a tablet, unless they're out in the field. So oftentimes, we encourage the applicants to still continue to subscribe to the applicant friendly or the ATS friendly resume because we want to make certain it hits the system properly. And then two, if you want to send something a little more appealing, you want to send that infographic resume, that digital CV, send that via email. Send that directly to them so that they're expecting it. They're wowed by your presentation. but don't stand the chance of having it thrown out because we can't transcribe the information. I use a Samsung Android, and I can tell you it's different. The information is transcended differently from my husband's iPhone.
Hmm. Yes, I completely. I run a job lab, which is we meet like every third Tuesday usually, and
Hmm.
I was impressed that upon the first meeting, some of them had. I think most of us had iPhones, and
Hmm.
they had their you know their resume on an iPhone,
Yes.
which I went, yay!
Awesome.
Yeah, and so, but I think there needs to be different versions. I think there need to be different versions and different ways that you can present and deliver your
Hmm.
resume as well, because I think delivery does matter in 2018. More employers are going to also probably bridge the gap in time and demand, expecting you to be able to respond right away
Yes.
for a request for a resume if they find you interesting or for more information. And you should be able to have some kind of correctable way of being able to do it from a mobile phone,
Hmm.
and then also send it from your mobile phone, because a lot of people, they're working, they're not, they shouldn't use their work email to transact, even though there are people who do. And I know this because people who
Hmm.
sign up for my newsletter, they use their work email address for
Oh
it. Yes. So if they're doing that, then I know that
no.
they're doing everything else on their work email. Even the government is like, dude, really? But that's a whole nother story. But having said that, mobile is going will enable you to also respond quicker, faster, and in some ways better.
Oh, yeah. We're moving towards real time responses. People are becoming more techno savvy, so they're really interested in being able to apply and receive a response right away. One of the things I encourage applicants to do is take that PDF version of your resume and upload it to maybe your cloud, Google Cloud, if you're
Hmm.
using Google Cloud, so that you can access it easily. And it's a controlled document. You can also send it from anywhere as long as you have Wi Fi.
Yeah.
You have internet, you can do it. Go to McDonald's if you have to, but
Right.
you send that resume as soon as they ask for it.
Absolutely. Um, what's interesting is that I think you can get the Microsoft Office these days
Oh, yeah.
now.
Hmm.
You can have it on your phone and you can correct it there and send it directly from your phone. Not even
Wonderful.
necessarily even in a PDF document, even though you should find out whether they want PDF or Word, but that'll make all the difference in the world. But nevertheless, but we're digressing a little bit, but I think it's
Okay.
important to have that conversation about how it needs to be delivered, because delivery makes a world of difference to the individual employer as well. So, again, think more of how you want to be viewed, and understand what it looks like in front of an employer. Would you hire you if you had the presentation that you're presenting now? If not,
Hmm.
it's time to change. So, but we should talk a little bit about pre-resume strategy before
Okay.
someone gets started in writing a resume these days. What are some tools and some techniques that you use to get your clients ready and suggest that your clients do before they sit down and write a resume?
And before they start to write the resume, one of the things I ask my clients to do, and it's something similar to what I keep at my disposal at all times, is a binder.
Hmm.
I want it's something general.
Hmm.
You're jotting down information about yourself. When I'm working with a client, one of the things I ask them to do for an entire week is to walk around with a notebook. I want you to really think about your what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
Oftentimes they forget strategic things, things that are very tactical, things that we could really use to enhance the resume because they do it repetitively. It's something I do every day. I didn't really give it much credence. I didn't think it really mattered in the resume, but it may be what really sets you apart from the competition.
Hmm.
You may be the only one that is called upon to sit with the CEOs when it comes to getting information out to the press. You're the only one that's brought in at your level. And they're thinking, hey, I've been sitting in this meeting for the last 2 years. I didn't really think much of it. But I want them to walk around with a notepad. The
Hmm.
second thing I ask candidates to do is really narrow down your target. What position are you really pursuing? What, not just I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. That's really not the purpose of a resume. The resume says we're marketing your particular skills.
Hmm.
We're also marketing achievements that you've accomplished, and also that you're the perfect candidate for a particular position. So if you have a position in mind, let's think about that position because that's what we're going to write toward. One of the hardest things to do is to try to get an applicant to who has had several jobs
Hmm.
over the past 10, 15 years. Yesterday's call is I was a truck driver, I was an automotive mechanic, and now I am a delivery guy for Amazon.
Hmm.
And so my question is, where do you see yourself? What position are you most interested in? Well, I'm not sure. Well, we have to find that out first before we start crafting a resume, because otherwise you're going to be spraying and praying. And
Right.
we know that's not the way, that's not the purpose of the resume.
Right.
So
Right.
those are the first two things we start with and trying to get them ready for the resume writing process. And one of the sites that I do refer them to is, I think it's called salary.com,
Hmm.
payscale.com and
Hmm.
salary.com and Glassdoor,
Hmm.
because I need you, if you know where you're going, then you need an idea geographically what to expect and pay in this particular area. What can you honestly, on the low, on the median, and on the high, expect to receive? So we're not walking into this blindly. And also, it's important that you know that this is something you're going to be doing maybe for the next 4 to 5 years before another transition.
Hmm. So, really, I think I do like, and I do something similar, is to kind of start having those salary expectations first and early. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think when I first started, I think I had it later as it came up, and oh, they got to the final stage. Now it's time to start talking about when really your decisions should be included first as far as your research for salary, and that'll also help determine where you want to work because and not just salary, compensation in total, not just
Benefits,
the
we,
benefits and what have you, and that will because it does come down to who do you want to work for and
mhm,
what do you want to do. And I think what you ultimately are saying is clarity is probably the first aspect
first step.
in getting everything done because that helps you help them and that helps them help themselves and to get an idea of what their job search trajectory is going to look like. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think you inferred to market as well. You should know your market. You should get an idea of your marketplace and what it looks like and what the trends are. And that includes salary. Is it going up or is it going down?
In this
Uh,
particular area.
in this
Absolutely.
particular area.
Are
And
you willing to relocate? Are you willing to go to San Jose or San Francisco for that particular job?
hmm yep. So, so all of those things are pretty important. These days, I think surprisingly, still there are people who are not willing to put in the work for the resume because every job description reads differently. And unfortunately, you can't, even if it's in the same industry, you can't hand in the same resume to the same companies or different companies, even if they're in the same industry.
That's true. And you have to partner with your resume writer or the resume firm that you select because they have to be willing to work with you until you achieve the job.
Hmm.
There's the difference because they're there for you. They're trying to help you. And there may be some change in language in the job announcement from job A to job B. but it may be a tool that you actually know how to use. This may be a proprietary system over here, but it performs the same function. So
Yes.
let's get that into the resume. Another thing, too, to really consider is your performance reviews. Mark, a lot of that information based on what your superiors found, what I call worth a pay increase.
Hmm.
These are the functions that you performed while on the job that your superior said is it merits a pay increase. These are your valuable speaking points. If you were able to save the company $75,000 this year and cut the staff by 20% and you use labor over here, and that's documented.
Hmm.
That's something you can prove. This is what your managers, your CEOs are saying we found value in. So when
Hmm.
I ask you your value proposition, you should be able to rattle those numbers off to me. You can pull up your performance review and say, Ms. Stiller, this is what merit me a pay increase of 10% last year. But this is what I want to sell going forward. This is what you're capable of doing. And these are the things that we ask our candidates to go back and look at. Did you save your performance reviews? Emails, accolades, maybe a customer wrote a nice review of something and it went into the on the board at work or something,
Hmm.
And I've heard people call it a brag book, but really what I say is really is patterning your career. You're managing your career. You're
Hmm.
taking control of moving, helping move yourself forward. Not necessarily just a book all about all of your accomplishments, but we also are now bringing in soft skills. You're starting to see that come back into the resume now because people want the more human approach to the resume.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges for a lot of people, like a potential client I talked to today,
Hmm.
where there hasn't been a performance review since she started her job.
Okay.
She does not get it. In fact, she kind of described it as more of a toxic environment. So in those cases where the feedback is not as consistent
Hmm.
or constructive, what kind of workarounds or what kind of mindset should someone obtain then?
Okay. One of the things you're going to be doing is looking for your opportunity to move forward. I don't want to say your exit strategy, but really that's what it is.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that quietly because you don't want to disrupt the workplace that you're currently at. You have to continue to feed your family and continue to work there. And when we do an employee background check, we want to be able to prove that you left there under good terms.
Hmm.
It may not have been the best work environment, but at least you left there with a 2 week notice, 3 week notice. You were able to train your replacement, things like that. And because of HR laws, there are just certain things that won't be disclosed about the entire engagement and working relationship there. So that we don't really worry about. But when I tell clients, if you're in an environment that you know you need to shift, it's time to move, then it's time to start networking. It's time to start looking at other opportunities.
Hmm.
It's time for you to get that resume, that piece of paper, and make it work for you. It's okay to start applying. You're not doing at this point, you're documenting every piece of technology that you've learned, every system. You're documenting your tenure with the organization, what you've learned there. Maybe you had some engagement with the field sales representatives. Maybe you've had some engagement with the marketing team, research and development team.
Hmm.
Document that. It doesn't have to be favorable from your boss about your working relationship, but what have you learned since you've been there? They hired you to perform a particular job, to solve a problem. Did you solve that problem since coming through the door? And that's what we're going to use to help build your resume.
Yeah, I think networking is a great piece, and I think it's important because it's actually part of the intel, right? That
Hmm.
you get from your from people that you meet and people who you find that you want to work with, and even if it's the company that you're applying to, you're using that information, you get that and make that a part of your resume as it applies to you because you know that they got hired that way, so therefore you can kind of follow that particular pattern as well.
And the good thing is when you're networking, you're not just networking for your next opportunity. We
Right.
were just reading some statistics around here about the average job seeker, the average employee stays on a job less than 5 years.
Hmm.
So 4.6, I think, is what BLS said. But if you know that going in, if you know the average tenure now is 5 years or less, your networking, your engagement is actually getting to know people in your field or the
Hmm.
field that you're interested in and finding out things about them that you like. Get to know them. And when it's time for you to make that shift, it won't be difficult for them to recommend you or tell you about the opening in their organization. One thing they're not going to do is if you connect with them, say on LinkedIn, and can you introduce me to the hiring manager over here at Aerospace? No. Who are you? What do you want? And why should I recommend you? Well, this is the benefit of networking. Networking says, I want to build a connection with you.
Hmm.
And it's connecting and reconnecting time and time again, not just for one opportunity, not just so that you can write me a recommendation, but it's actually to get to know you, learn from you, you learn from me, and we share that knowledge. And if it so happens that I need someone, I, I find myself out of work and I mention it, you can say, hey, are you interested in this? Because we have an opening before it hits the job market, before it's on Monster or Career Builder or Indeed.
Right.
We need that inside track.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important for people to know. Again, because most people don't network. They don't network. They network PR, what they call PRN in the medical field, or only as needed.
As
Uh,
needed.
instead of understanding that you should always be networking.
Yes.
You should always do your best to try to create and stay in demand for employers and for people who are looking for a position that you may fit. Let's go a little bit to the anatomy of the resume.
Okay.
Some of this is going to be really basic for some people, and some people are going to be surprised that the basic is something that they still need to gain some skill and some knowledge at. The very beginning, the very top of the resume, we're talking about usually what people used to put there was the name, address, and city, phone number, and email address or addresses or phone numbers. These days, probably not as much information needs to go there as it used to. Is that correct?
And that is correct. Most of your contact is going to come via email or via telephone call.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can, because of security reasons with technology, I would recommend including your name, also including a means of contact, whether that's email and a telephone number. But I would definitely say hold off on the address, the physical address.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would like to put the city and state because the job they're looking for is really close in proximity. So they want to show that they're local.
Mm-hmm.
That's different. But to actually put your physical address nowadays is unnecessary.
Good. Now, and like you said, one phone number, one email address.
Thank you.
Hopefully, yeah, a one email address with your name on it, not somebody else's name, not your
Keep it professional.
yes,
Yes.
not the street address where you used to live, and not the nickname that you had as a child.
Absolutely.
I was telling someone earlier the strangest email address I'd ever seen that contacted me, pinkbubbles51 at yahoo.com.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh,
Wrap,
my.
wrap your head around that for a moment, if you can.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
And
that
well, see
was.
that, unfortunately, as a recruiter, if I put on my recruiter hat, I'm thinking already, okay, 51 may be the year he or she was born. Pink bubbles, I'm thinking, not so much for this industry. And then the fact that you use Yahoo, I was just
Yes.
like, no, because
Yes.
we're in a technology age. You have to evolve with technology. And
Yes.
so now we're moving away from the AOLs, the Yahoos, and I would suggest getting the Gmail.
Yeah.
It,
That was a suggestion, and to use something other than pink bubbles,
yes, please.
but which
And we don't
probably
want to age discriminate, so just leave the numbers alone.
right, right, exactly. But also the terminology is is not inappropriate in a bad way, but it's not relevant in a good way.
Exactly.
So those kind of things we definitely want to see
Personal
on
email. If I'm
personal.
emailing a sister or a friend, that's great.
Yeah, even though I would still balk, I would still balk at the pink bubbles part. Anywho, uh, let's see. The next would be there's a section for headline or summary.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people put summary, they put objective, they put all kinds of things, and you're making the face that I make as
Mm.
well. Is that's not the best idea to use.
Well, in the beginning of the resume is like our intro. We
Hmm.
want to definitely maximize the white space there. It's a high level view of what they can expect in the rest of the body of the resume.
Hmm.
So your objective is your objective. I'm not really interested in that, nor is the hiring manager.
Right.
To gain a position with a thriving organization that will utilize my skills. Okay, we got it.
Hmm.
But the summary or your position statement tells me what you have to offer my company. Why did you apply to this position? Because I feel I have exactly what you're looking for. Here's why. I can do this. I have that to offer. I can bring this to the table. I can hit the ground running in this particular area. That's something that I would be more interested in continuing the course of reading.
Yes. Yes. And so really that space summary is useful. Now, I've heard the argument from an
Mhm.
author of a book that actually is kind of well known. Um, Scott Bennett wrote the book The Elements of Resume Style
Okay.
years ago. And I had him on the show. Actually, it's been a little bit of time now, but I think he brought up a kind of a useful argument. He said the summary section is not really needed at all because your resume is a summary. So, so why would you have to have a summary on about a summary? Which was a great argument. I thought of a couple of things, but his logic was so simple that it made sense. And really, tell you the truth, through experience in the '90s, I think I excluded the summary section for a long time because the objective nobody is. I figured out the objective statement is kind of is not useful even then.
Obsolete.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Even more obsolete now than it ever
Very
has
even
been.
now.
Even for college students, it's obsolete.
And you're right about the summary. One of the things, some of the resumes I write do not include a summary because of the information that we're positioning on the resume and the way we're positioning it.
Hmm.
Now, what I would say about the summary is given the reader, the recipient of the document, we know now that they really scan the document or skim over it. So
Hmm.
there's certain areas that they look at on the resume, what we consider hot areas on the resume,
Hmm.
the name, your contact information. We want to quickly they're going to read over the first couple of lines of the resume. So, what you want to do, if you're going to include a summary, you want to make it impactful.
Hmm.
And then they're going to move to education. They may look over really quickly your chronological work history, and they're going to look at technologies now. So, with that in mind, the summary area can actually be a useful tool. If you know they're going to take only a few seconds to really read over your resume, where would you put your information? If
Hmm.
they're going to only take 5 to 10 seconds, I know everybody says, oh, it's 8 seconds, it's 6 seconds, but we know that it's a brief amount of time that each recruiter or hiring manager is looking over the resume. So if I know that from a reader's perspective, the first thing you look at is the top of any document, and you start reading from left to right. If I'm going to do that, everything the first couple of sentences I read need to be impactful,
Hmm.
enough to make me continue to read. And so you can still find value in your summary or your position statements at the top of your resume.
Now, it's also to note that the summary, if one putting summary is kind of a space waster
Yeah.
in a sense. Um, you know, putting the position that you're trying to apply for is it more effective or is it not?
Well, when you sent the resume, did you not apply to the position at that particular time? So when I click on the button to send my particular resume to this person, then he or she already knows what requisition I'm tied to. Remember, the applicant tracking system now being in place has helped us really sort through a lot of paper
Mm.
and present a trail. So when applicants are applying, there's a requisition already created. And if they apply to this position, I know exactly which position you're interested in. That's why candidates take several opportunities with one company and they apply to each position they're interested in because they're afraid that you're only going to consider me for this one position that I apply to. Now,
Hmm.
federal resumes are a bit different. You're going to have to put the job code and a requisition number, things of that sort, but there's a standard format for that.
Hmm.
Now, with corporate America, no. I know exactly which position you're interested in when you click the button to apply.
Mm. But if you're applying to an ATS, um, doesn't that space and that headline and putting the position, does that do anything for the keyword density of the document?
It should not, because if you're looking for that one extra keyword, that should actually be throughout your document. We should see that 3 to 5 times throughout your document from start to finish. It's just like a website developer, someone who's writing content for a web page.
Hmm.
They know that, okay, I have the header, it's included in my header. I have this, I have that. But really, what Google is scanning, same thing with our applicant tracking system, they're looking for relevancy. You could use the word, you could what we say, make it keyword rich, or you can front load it, and that's still not adding value. I
Hmm.
remember the time we would really include all of the keywords in a box on the resume, and in the center of your resume, these are all my skills or competencies, and we would try to make it keyword rich. It actually needs to be in the document, in the wording, to add relevancy. How did you apply that particular skill? If you are a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, then were you a Chief Financial Officer here, here, and here, these last three financial organizations? And as a CFO, you did this particular function. I'm going to see that written throughout the document. There's no need to waste white space just to say, I want to apply to this position, and I'm going to use it as a keyword.
Mm. Very good. And there's no use of trying to secretly encode
Yes.
keywords in the white space using white font,
Oh,
color
please
font.
don't do that. If you performed the job, if you've completed the task, let's write about it. Let's talk about real issues, real things that you've accomplished. And it's easier to speak to in the interview as well. You're going to remember those situations.
Right. So, in other words, every time the keyword is mentioned, there should be a functionality associated with
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. How? Because now everything is about show and tell. If you write it in that resume, be ready to back it up.
Yeah.
In 2018, you're going to find I just worked with an applicant for a $30,000 a year job, $30,000 a year
Hmm.
for a nonprofit. And this individual was sent through 3 interviews. And on the third one was asked to give a PowerPoint presentation because that's one of the things that was included in the skills, that he had excellent verbal and written communication skills
Hmm.
and that he knew how to use Microsoft Office and PowerPoint. So they put him to the test. Thankfully, he knew how to do it,
Right.
but this for $30,000 a year.
Which is not uncommon these days at all. It is about show me, just don't tell me.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned something that's very key too. I think a lot of people are still doing this, and I think it depends on the industry. But there's that middle section you referred to. Some people call it core competencies. Other
Hmm.
people call it professional skills. And they have no functionality when you put it in that middle section. It's almost like you're filling it with keywords so it can be scanned. And
Yeah,
honestly, I used to do it. I used to have that section, and that was kind of a trend at that particular
absolutely.
time. That is no longer a trend at this particular time that is effective.
You know what, Mark? What I will say is when working with a candidate, you have to know what your end goal is.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally prefer to utilize that white space to add content. I mean, to really be impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are, say, right at one page and we're missing a little bit of meat there, I may still insert some core competencies to help flesh out the document.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not necessary, I want to include it throughout the document. I want them every time they read, it's like, wow, you actually do know how to do this. This is exactly a full cycle. You understand from start to finish. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what they want to see. You're going to get that key word. So sometimes when I'm working with a candidate, I'll show them the key skills. These are all the skills we're going to include in your document. Now, as we're reading through the document, we're going to check them off together to make sure I've hit it throughout the entire resume.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are 3 to 5 key skills that you really know in your industry are important, we're going to make sure we use that at least 3 to 5 times throughout the document because we want to make sure that you rank high in the applicant tracking system. But when it gets to the recruiter, the end recipient, I don't want to bore them with the content. So you're dealing with 2 different areas. You got a computer on one end that we're
Mm-hmm.
fighting against, but then I also have human eyes that are going to view this document.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to meet both requirements.
Absolutely. Now, let's get into the meat of the document,
Sure.
which is really how explaining and the core storytelling part of the document, in which you're trying to help build your skill set aligned with each job, and how it applies and the functionality, your achievements, your results, the impact, all of that will go into those sections when you describe your job and your position. But I think for a lot of challenges that are kind of two-sided. One we can talk about is how, unfortunately, people are still copying and pasting job descriptions that they desire into the section of the job where they currently work or they used to work, and they expect that to fly and get attention.
No. Because one of the things you have to think about is your thought process. If you're given a task, what was your thought process in order to achieve the goal?
Mm-hmm.
So, and with when we go and learn how to write resumes, and we join different resume writing academies, they'll come out with the CAR, the challenge action result,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll come out with the STAR situation. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at painting an entire picture. To copy a job announcement is just generic. Actually, that can be written by anyone. It can be written by HR, the generalist. It can be written by a manager, anyone within the organization that says, this is what I'm looking for. Now, your job is to present on the resume clearly. I can do exactly what you're looking for. Here's an example.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where I actually performed it, achieved it. That was the challenge. I got it done in 6 months. I was given 8 months. I came in under budget. I managed a team of 50. They told me the last person took 75, so there's ways that you can present your claim that you know how to do exactly what that job announcement says.
Mm-hmm. Now, still to date, and I used to work a lot with federal resumes, you were encouraged to copy the job description onto your resume. You were encouraged to do that. Um, and it's still happening that in
It is
that
still
particular,
happening.
yet it's still an ineffective way of presenting yourself.
I actually had a candidate I was working with, and she had an inside track, which was wonderful because we were able to get really constructive feedback.
Hmm.
And we wrote the resume. We thought we put everything in but the kitchen sink. And when she submitted it, she said, "Let me send it to this person first. They work in this department. She's going to review it." And the one thing they asked us to go back and do is because they don't want semantics, was to go back and in every area that she had relevant skills,
Hmm.
use their terminology. So what instead of just copying and pasting a job announcement, what they asked us to do was go in and say, okay, if she is accustomed to Adobe Illustrator and she's worked on a different proprietary system that's really what we consider equal in
Hmm.
its functionality, then you can also put that in parentheses. So we learned a different skill set of, okay, this is the proprietary system that's equivalent to your Adobe Illustrator that you're
Hmm.
asking for. They wanted to make certain. Unfortunately, you do get some people on the back end that don't want to really take time to read. They
Yeah.
don't want to try to figure out. So you have to answer all the questions and make it clear. And that's part of the process of resume writing is painting a picture and making it clear.
Right. And speaking of clarity, the other half of writing a resume and some of the challenges is that you have badly written job descriptions
Yes.
where it's more often than not because they're everybody hates the hiring process.
Oh
Everybody
yes.
hates the fact that it's a time suck and that it's a waste of time. They rather be doing something else. So therefore, there are times when you're trying to gather keywords from the
Hmm.
job description, they're not there because well, put it this way, there might be some that are there emphasized, but for a lot of candidates, part of their problem is discerning what's going to be the more important skills and requirements of the job from the job description. And that's where you have where networking kind of compensates
Yes.
for that aspect of it.
Absolutely. And I have been guilty of that in times past where we have
Yeah,
been so busy, you will take a job description that you've used,
yeah.
5 years ago for that position that you're now needing to refill. And you do what? You republish it.
Hmm.
You don't have a lot of time. So you're in a hurry. I need to get this position filled. We just lost this person. And then when the applications and the resumes are coming in, you're looking, this is not what I need. This is not really what this position entails. Well, if you go back to the job announcement, that's exactly what you said.
Right,
So I had to start all over again. It wasn't what the company was looking for.
right, right. Yeah. So it's not just what's written alone. You'll
Yes.
see something on Career Builder or Monster, and then sometimes somebody may get a little lucky and be able to get the inside track to the job
Yes.
description. Not often, but but sometimes, and those two still may not be enough for you to create a resume. Again, we're not expecting the resume to do everything, including getting you
No.
hired. We're expecting it to get some attention for the hiring manager to pick you.
Yes.
So let's talk about a little bit about, and I know that we're probably closing in a little bit on time,
Okay.
a little bit. We try to go as far as we can. But the idea and perspective as I write my resume, some people use the third person I, or first person, I'm
First
sorry,
person
first
I.
person
Yes. Don't use
I.
third. Yeah.
And there are resume writers who use it. They're
Yeah.
they're they're nationally recognized resume writers who use I. Your perspective, and as we talked before, both work.
They do.
So when should you not use it?
I would say if your field, and you should know your field, your industry, is not acquainted with the first person usage. If they're still working, my cousin, she's applied for a law firm right after law school.
Hmm.
They are very traditional. They're still looking, they're not interested in the infographic resume. They weren't interested in the digital CVs,
Hmm.
nor were they interested in resumes written out of what they considered the standards or the status quo. So at that particular time, we had to go back and say, look, these guys are accustomed to seeing a resume come over in third person. Let's give them what they want. Now, if you're dealing with marketing, I love marketers because they're willing to step outside of the box. They're
Hmm.
willing to take a chance. They will send you a lime green resume with their picture on it and their favorite sports or their children. And it's like, wow,
Yeah. Right.
but I wouldn't say send that to a law firm.
Hmm.
So, what we do here at Dillard and Associates is I still write, and it could be from years and years of training. I still write in third person when it comes to my resume.
Hmm.
You're more than welcome to always change that to first person if you feel more comfortable that way. But when it comes to a social profile like LinkedIn, where your picture is included, if it's on a different social network or a URL that you're hosting you have your own personal URL and you're talking about yourself. Well, let's move to first person because I'm looking at your face and I'm hearing your voice and your tone. I want to get to know you. Again, we're back to networking and
Hmm.
engagement. And I don't think when I meet you, you're going to sound like a robot. So
Right.
I really want to, if I'm looking at you, I want to get to know you. If I want to instant message you, talk to you. But from a professional document, we have set a trend of third person. And so I've sort of leaned towards that in my writing style.
Very good. So that answers that question. Again, it goes back to knowing your industry.
Yeah, it really
Uh,
does.
and networking takes care of that. Reading industry trends, joining associations, you'll find out what the trends are. So you got to do that part of your homework. The question we get very often is the idea that bullet points ad nauseum are kind of faded out, and using 2 or 3 bullet points per, maybe even 4 per job is a better use of space. Your input, please.
I still stick with the standard of if you're going to include a bullet, 3 to 5. If I'm going to use the bulleting format, then it does require 3 to 5 bullets.
Yeah.
So I've sort of set that now. With that said, I still see a lot of resumes when written in the traditional format include bullets. I just received one on yesterday of someone that's transitioning from aerospace. And that's really what's happening. They still have the traditional resume. Now, if you're going to use more of a marketing piece, let's get rid of the bullet. If you're going to use the infographic resumes, there's other ways of positioning now on that one page document where
Hmm.
you don't really need a bullet. But keep in mind that infographic resume is not going through the applicant tracking system.
Hmm. Correct.
That is being emailed directly. So there are some things that are in our programming we have to remember as well. When we make an ATS friendly resume, one of the things that is taken away and is exchanged are the bullets. It is completely stripped. So it's not necessary to have bullets in everything that you write.
Hmm.
I like my preference is if it enhances the document. If it really has a more white space, it makes it easier to read. If I can draw you into a particular bullet point, then I will use bullet.
Now I'm going to give a little shout out to Hannah Morgan, who wrote a book on infographic
Yeah.
resumes, and I'll put a little link in the show notes for that. Uh, but having said that, when you use different forms of a resume, whether really, if we think about it, um, anything that helps you stand out is kind of the extension of a resume.
Yes, it is.
The infographic, or whether you use a PowerPoint on SlideShare,
Hmm.
or anything that would present you in a marketing sense is kind of an extension of your resume.
YouTube.
YouTube is absolutely a blog, an article. All of
Yes.
that is making you much more marketable.
Hmm.
It's not good enough just to have a resume anymore. I mean, to have only a resume.
Well, the resume is not going away. We've
No.
seen a lot of talk about that, or
Yes.
death of the resume. The resume is going away. The resume is not going away. It is still necessary to bridge the job seeker and the company that's looking for a position or has a position to fill.
Hmm.
It's still bringing the two. It's starting the meeting and the engagement, and I still need to see your information. But you're absolutely correct. With the birth of the enhancement of technology, with it evolving, technology evolving at rapid paces, we have to keep up. And one of the things to do is to showcase your ability to stay relevant. Whether you use a tool out of your Microsoft Word, if you use other tools that you find online, this shows the employer that you're more modern. If you notice now, the resumes are including your social media links.
Yes.
It's including LinkedIn, and because it's all becoming a part of your hiring portfolio.
Hmm.
So it's important that you stay relevant and show them. The first document I get needs to tell me that you are um, a modern job seeker.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Conducting a modern job search.
Search. There you go.
You kind of inferred to it a little bit. Um, Testimonies used on a
Sure.
resume. Uh, your thoughts? I like it. I've seen it work. I've seen it be real effective. I
Hmm.
know not everybody's on board with it, just like every other part of the resume.
Oh, yes.
But I still say that it increases the interest of the reader that other people are saying about you, especially if the person is real. And let's say if it's a LinkedIn recommendation that's already on a
There,
vine.
yes. Love them.
Yes, right. So,
Yes.
so why not include it on the resume? Just maybe a little short snippet, right after you put the job and what you've
Mhm.
accomplished. At the end, what somebody has actually said about you, being that's publicly found anyway.
And take it one step further, Mark. You can add it in a sidebar going down the resume and then include the social link to see the other 15, 20, 30 testimonials that
Hmm.
now tells me about your character, who
Hmm.
you are. You said in your resume that you have integrity as a sales rep. You said that you are a people person. You said that people always say that you're Mr. or Miss Customer Service.
Hmm.
You go above and beyond. Now I have 20 testimonials telling me more and more about your character. And that's what a resume should do. Not only tell me about the employers that you've worked for and the money you've saved them or the goals that you've reached, but who are you? And what do people say about you? You said you're a team player. Well, you know what? Now I can believe you more because I have all of these testimonials here of people at different companies at different stages in your life giving the same feedback.
And you know that they're real people because the
Yes.
person's associated already publicly again, uh, already there. And I think even some people may get intimidated. Oh, 20. No, really, if you just had two or three
Yes.
recommendations, that is just as effective. And again, it's a social proof aspect that say,
It
hey,
is.
this person has earned the right to respect. At least we should take note. This
Mhm.
person has earned that kind of respect if somebody writes it, because most people don't want to write a
No, they
recommendation.
don't.
And
That's true.
you know that as a business person as
Oh,
well as
yes.
I do, that maybe 1 out of 5 might have said that, oh, I'll
Shot
write
you a quick
one.
email.
Right, right. But maybe 1 out of 10 might write a recommendation. So, I think those are important to get, and I think those are part of the marketing aspect as well as, and also really a PR aspect of it because somebody else is saying that about you as a testimony to you. And also the soft skill aspect of it we talked about a little bit. Talk about what kind of person, how polite you are, how resilient you are,
Oh yeah.
or maybe even how persistent you are, and how that positively impacted that person in the workplace. So those things are important. Uh, so getting below in the other sections, and some of these things are kind of interchangeable in some ways. Like education can go on the bottom or the
Or
top
the
of the
top. Yeah.
resume, depending upon what the job requires.
hmm Absolutely. And also, how long ago did you achieve the master's degree? If it was 10, 15 years ago, maybe not including it at the very top of your resume. It may be something you add to the bottom. But if it was a recent graduate,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that we do also bring to the top of the resume to the forefront
Hmm.
is that it was recently acquired and um, their knowledge that they've gained is still very new. But it also explains why they may have a short job history below because
Hmm.
they've been in school.
Awesome. Now, here's something that's really important when it comes to education, or maybe even this will run to volunteers. By the way, volunteer work definitely, I think, put on your resume. Doesn't matter what it is. It says a lot more about you than you know in a positive way that you possibly
Yeah,
could. But standardizing the terminology is, I think, is pretty important. As I was talking to Susan Joyce not that long ago,
hmm
we were talking about LinkedIn SEO and how important the keyword aspect is. And her example was like perfect. She had a degree in management information systems.
hmm
Nobody uses that term anymore. Now it's information technology and some other similarities of that. Um, if you have that on your degree, should you, in more than likely, it's going to be from 2000 or so,
hmm
you would likely put that at the bottom. But along with that, you should include your updated training since you've done that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you've received C++ training from any other organization, from any type of on the job training, outside training, we want to definitely see that. If you've received frontline leadership, American Management Association,
Hmm.
anything that we can use to show that you're continuously applying yourself to learn, keep up with especially in technology. I can't stress that enough. When it comes to technology, that field is growing at paces. It's keeping us all on our toes. So you have to always avail yourself for ongoing learning and training and development.
Hmm. Excellent. And you want to remain relevant.
Please.
You, you want to remain relevant. And, you put yourself in a it kind of becomes a tough spot when you don't have that continual training
Yeah,
because that says that you don't care about what you just got your degree for, nor do you care about the value that you're going to be offering another employer.
absolutely.
Because it's really our responsibility to keep up our own training and manage our own careers. So I think we hit most of the main sections. I think one of the things that we kind of referred to is the education. We talked about the education, and we talked about the certifications. Volunteer, I've already mentioned. Is there anything else that maybe we would need to include? Lastly, on the as far as when we talk about the anatomy of a resume.
Well, one of the things we do not want to see is references are available upon request. Please
Yes.
stop.
Yes.
If I can't give you any other tips, please take that off of your resume. We understand. that if we ask for your references, you'd make those available.
Yes. Um, how many references are? I don't know if you're finding what I'm finding. How many references? I think that's kind of changed in the paradigm of things too. I think a little bit in the sense that everybody used to think is two or three, and though there are employees who do two or three,
Still, yes.
there are even more now asking for more references.
Mhm. Absolutely. I remember when we used to have a form that we would send out, and it would ask for three references, one personal, two professional.
Hmm.
And now I can tell you, with most of the companies that are getting back with me, they're asking to go further back. They want to see at least a reference professional, not just personal anymore, but professional references maybe from each organization that you work for. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
When did we start asking for that?
Right. Well, I think when you I think one of the discussions I had recently was employers are being that you're asking for a shorter timeline. Now I'm
Okay.
interested more in the detail of your abilities. Is can you perform that function, or can you get someone to vouch for that function, not just to vouch for the actual job? Is that making any
Yeah,
sense?
exactly.
So,
Yes.
so if you say that you are using your example that you have C plus plus uh, certification, how did you use it at your last
Hmm.
job? Or
Absolutely.
now the trick is that some people don't want to go and refer that far, because if it's 10 years ago, the likelihood of how somebody remembers that
It's
is
very tricky.
yes. So it's kind of a catch 22, but at least supply the reference.
Yes.
And you
And
may
then
have to,
prepare the reference.
I was going to say, you're going to have to coach them.
Yes, please prepare your references. Hey, Bob, you remember me?
Yes.
You said I could use you as a reference. I'm back in the job market now. Here's what I'm looking to do going forward. If they should call you, this is what they'll be interested in. You remember that time when we had blah? Oh, yeah, I do. Bring things back to the remembrance, because we all get busy and
Yes.
we're moving on. I've gotten calls and I'm thinking, who? So they just refresh my memory, and it's like, oh my goodness, who are you and how are you doing?
Right.
Again, back to connecting and reconnecting.
Yes, absolutely. Um, this has been a robust discussion. I think the last time I did it 3 years ago, Jackie Barrett Poindexter and I went like an hour and 20 minutes. This is just a tad bit shorter, but I think this one like it's an hour and almost 10 minutes.
Oh,
But nevertheless, I think it's important to have all of that caught up, so that people can have one place to get a good information. I think this is it. This has been a great show, and as always, you deliver with flying colors. So,
oh, thank
I
you.
I thank you very much. And if people want to know more about you and your company, not that I haven't told them before, but please tell them, how would you like to be contacted if they want to use your services or ask you more questions?
Oh, sure. You can always find us online at www.dillardandassociates.com. And there you'll find all of our contact information and easy tools where you can make a call or send a quick email.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining me
Thank you
today.
for having me.
And thank the rest of you for joining me. Don't forget this guide. I tell you, I've gotten more than 2,000 requests for the 118 job search tips for the modern job seeker in 2018. For those of you who are overwhelmed and confused, this guide is absolutely is really necessity. If you consider the last time you looked for a job in 2015 and you haven't checked on the latest job trend since, you're light years behind on finding your next opportunity. So this is a must grab still. It is free all all I ask is you put your email address in, and you'll get a copy of it. And it has been surprisingly is in a couple of other places as well. So it's not only on my site, but there's a couple of other sites you can actually find it, and people have referenced it because they found it pretty useful. So definitely want to do that. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you and talking to you again. If you give your email address and you got the guide, you also get the bi-weekly newsletter, which is still hot. Love doing it for you guys. I get so much great feedback. The stories that I include in it, some of the things that are going on, the job search trends. Thank you very much. And you guys have a great week. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.